Turning now to Detroit's bankruptcy, Kevyn Orr filed an updated plan of adjustment on Monday with some bigger cuts, signaling a new phase of negotiation. So here are the cuts for you. Police and fire retirees would see a 14% cut instead of the original 10%. The city would now pay general obligation bondholders 15 cents on the dollar from 20 cents. And a big change speaks directly to pension management moving forward. Eliminate the current board of trustees for the general pension fund as well as for police and fire. And there are new details about the city's reinvestment, including $78 million to hire more civilians in the police department, $25 million for a Department of Transportation security force, and over $90 million for software and servers to improve the city's IT system. You know, as the deals get worked out or they don't get worked out, we could see more changes in the next coming weeks. So Kevyn Orr is signaling, well, you didn't like that deal? Guess what? You're probably really not going to like this deal.
And that's the stage where the negotiations have entered that stage where instead of adding things to the table to sweeten a deal, they're taking things off the table to pressure folks into a settlement. You've moved from carrot to stick. And I think this is not a bluff. The deal's going to continue to get worse the longer they dawdle and wait. There's no more money out there to make things better. And at some point, these creditors have to come to the realization that this is it.
So we've been watching, and this slowly progressed, Stephen, or actually quickly progressed. We are now in a new stage of negotiation, would you say?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is actually the stage of negotiation we've been in from the jump. I mean, in an ordinary bankruptcy, the first plan of adjustment would have been put out there with a time, right? This is what you get if you agree within the next 14 days, right? And the deal gets worse from there. Kevyn Orr didn't do that. I'm not sure that in municipal bankruptcies you tend to do things as hardcore as that, but he certainly, the way he's used to dealing with things like this, that's how you do it. And so he's had this deal on the table for what, a couple months now, and left it the way it is. You know, I think he's saying, I don't have time to wait. The city doesn't have time to wait. As Nolan pointed out, there's not going to be any more money than there is now. It's less. So you better take what's here, or you're going to end up with nothing.
And you know, there are some real time deadlines here. The governor would like to get his budget done by the end of May. They've got to include the state's portion of this $16 million bailout in the state budget. The foundations are getting a little nervous about, you know, they thought this would settle it. When they came up with $460 million, they thought this was going to settle things. And as it turns out, you know, it's getting thrown back in their face.
You still have this tension between the pensioners who, you know, are the most vulnerable class of creditor.
It feels like all the focus is on them right now and whether they're going to move.
It's really hard to make the case that, you know, old people who cannot necessarily go back to work ought to have to take a hit, but at the same time, there's just not enough money to pay off all of what the city owes, and so the question becomes: how does the current pension board get its members to see that this is maybe the right deal or the best deal you can get out of the city? And I don't think that's an easy. It's not an easy sell.
I'm not even quite sure the pension board thinks it's the best deal they're going to get, so why would they even want to convince their people?
They're counting on this Court of Appeals case to uphold the Michigan constitutional protection of pensions. I think that's a long shot, but you know, you're right. The pensioners are the most critical element here because the unsecured creditors are going to take what they get. And they're not holding any mortgage. They've got no promise. If it comes down to zero, there's not much they can do. I mean, they can squawk and moan, but they're unsecured creditors. The secured creditors should have found out today whether or not, you know, that deal or negotiated is going to go through. That leaves the pensioners, and you've got to come to some agreement with the pensioners. Nobody wants to cram down more severe cuts on the pensioners, but at some point it's going to come to that.
The discussions of the negotiations is always very interesting, and I know that we've talked about it a lot through this entire process. I always think it's important, though, when we talk about that plan of adjustment, is to put up those numbers as well of the money that they look to reinvest back into the city and where that's going to go, because that to me is the key process of why we're all doing this, of the end, the finish line of what we all want to see happen to the city, that you need money to improve basically how this city runs when you're talking of millions of dollars going into a new IT service, or just millions of dollars in hiring civilians in the police department so you can get officers out of those desk jobs and back on the streets.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was the flip side of the renegotiation of the swaps, right? Originally, that we'd get a loan to settle the swaps and then get another loan to plow into services. The judge split that up because he was uncomfortable with the swaps part of that deal, and they had to go back and renegotiate that a few times. And now we finally have him signing off on the services side of that, and that's going to make a big difference. One of the things I think people have forgotten is that even when we get out of bankruptcy later this year, things are going to be really tight in Detroit. I mean, this gets a lot of the debt off our back. It restructures some other things. But it doesn't fix the revenue problem that we have, and the revenue projections over the next 10 years are not great. They don't grow until the latter part of this decade. It's going to be tough to deliver the services we need to deliver to attract people back. It's not just that we have to maintain what we're doing now, which is really bad. We've got to make it better, and there's not necessarily a lot of money to do that.
Detroit has become a growing city. This bankruptcy deal, if it goes through as proposed, will free up about $150 million a year for the new mayor. That's a lot of money, but it doesn't it's not necessarily enough to improve all the services that need improving, to create a city that people want to come to. And as Steve said, that's the overall goal here.